Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to each one of you here today. Your presence at Billion Dreams 2023 is truly appreciated. Before we dive into this discussion, I'd like to take a moment to express our gratitude to our distinguished panelists for joining us to shed light on the topic India's path to global leadership in tech, talent, and innovation. Today we have Mr. Achyuta Ghosh with us. He is the Senior Director and Head of NASScom Insights and will be expertly moderating the session today. He is a distinguished professional with over 2 decades of experience in analytics, research, and consulting. His insights have assisted in Fortune 500 companies and investors innovate in areas like IoT, blockchain, and many more. Next up, we have Mr. Purushottam Kaushik, head of the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution in India in the World Economic Forum. With an impressive 28 years of experience in the leadership and consulting, he is a visionary in technology, innovation, and leadership. He is recognized as an industry expert, board advisor, and mentor to startups in the domains like IoT, AI, smart energy, and smart cities. We are also delighted to have Mr. Dushyant Thakor, Deputy Executive Director of the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, with over 2 decades of experience in investment promotion, facilitation, and global standards. Mr. Dushyant's journey includes spearheading national investment promotion initiatives and transformative projects like Make in India. As a global trainer in investment promotion, he has worked in more than 10 countries, bridging India's relations with Africa. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Yaduvendra Mathur, former Secretary to the Government of India, among our panelists, with over 40 years of experience in senior policy making both India and internationally. Yaduvendra has had an impactful positions like CMD of Export-Import Bank of India, Chairman of Rajasthan Financial Corporation, Principal Secretary of Finance Budget, and many more. Currently, he serves on several boards and is a passionate mentor to many startups. Thank you everyone for your valuable time today. Throughout the discussion, we encourage our attendees to actively participate. You can drop in your queries and share your thoughts in the chat box below. So, without further ado, let's begin our exploration. This is India's path to global leadership in tech, talent, and innovation. Over to you, Mr. Achyuta.
Thank you, Shreya. Dear friends, thank you all for joining in on this very interesting discussion on India's path to global leadership, where we will aim to explore India's phenomenal transformation over the past decade, made possible by the rapid use of growing technology ecosystem. The session could not be better timed. Earlier this month, India took center stage, as you all know. As the world grappled with complex challenges, India's proactive stance in the recent G20 forum has amplified its standing as a key player in shaping international discourse and action. The G20 leaders' declaration with 100% consensus on all development and geopolitical issues is best regarded as a historical feat. And what really stood out for me was the pivotal role of technology in fostering inclusive, secure, and ethical practices for growth. What I was especially proud of also how India led from the front by consistently investing and building its own digital public infrastructure that serves as the cornerstone for inclusive economic growth. India further demonstrated its technological prowess through the successful Chandrayaan mission, but what we achieved is just the tip of the iceberg, I feel. The country has set some audacious goals in place, and there is urgent need for collaboration, communication, and strategizing if we aim to achieve them, supplemented, of course, by a rich diaspora. And this is what we want to explore in this discussion today. And we have a great lineup of speakers: Purushottam, Yaduvendra, Ved, Mani Tiwari, Dushyant. I mean, all these people have experts in this topic. And what we would be that we would be honored to hear from all of you about the key drivers, challenges, and opportunities that lie ahead. We have about 6 themes to cover, and we will try to do that in the next 30 to 35 minutes, so that we will try to address audience questions in the last 5 to 10 minutes. So while I will ask some of these questions to specific speakers and some to all of you, we would really like to have this conversation free flowing. So please feel free to step in with your point of view in any of the questions. Does that work for this group? Okay. So getting started, I think the first we want to explore the catalyst behind India's tech boom in the recent past. India has emerged as the fastest growing country among the top five economies in the first quarter of 2023. What key factors do you believe have been primary catalysts driving India's remarkable growth, especially in the context of technology and innovation? And maybe Yaduvendra, you would like to start this at your end.
Yeah. Thanks, Achyuta. It's a pleasure to be here. Really, the catalysts are to begin with the strong leadership. Leadership not only at the political level, but leadership across the other. Specifically on the tech side, very very strong leadership over the last decade, and I think that is in no small measure the key catalyst. But it's also a moment whose it's like the time has come. Post 1991 reforms, the market really became the key driver, not the state. So I think that early recognition, or in a way, some people say maybe 2 decades late, had we started in the early 80s or even in the 70s, the market became the key catalyst. So I think the size of the Indian market, the growth of the market for tech, for innovation, really had started already. And so the second big catalyst is the market. And the markets are then really led by industry, by innovators, by the academia. So that strong academic fervor in India really came to fruition. So I guess it is like a country's time has come. So we could really feel that in the first quarter itself of the current financial year, you could see that in spite of the world's other large big economies faltering post-pandemic, but we were able to still hold on and maintain, steady growth, and that's where the figures are for India, doing something differently, which other big economies could not. I'll rest there.
Thanks, Yaduvendra. I think it's a good thing that you pointed out, a sense of destiny, that the time is now, the time has come. And people usually look at countries, the strength of a country by the size of the population it has, because that leads to consumption, that leads to, the markets that needs to be served. But just consumption, just market serving, India always had that population, right? But how does the economic growth typically come together with that factor? I think that's the key here. But you touched upon something, which is what is India doing differently? And this is a question that I would like to pose to all of you, right? That, what do you see India, what did India do anything different in the last few years that really made it stand out? Leadership was a good point, Mr. Mathur. One analysis we did was in the last 18, 19 years, India had two leaders, while compared to the rest of the leading countries, the average was about 5 to 6. So therein there is a point that you made, but love to hear from the rest of you on what are the things that you think India is doing differently in addition to the points that Yaduvendra mentioned.
Quick one from me: speed and scale. I think when you look at any initiative taken up, and especially from the governments or the state governments, you'll see the pace at which it is completely transformational. So if I can just use these words: speed, scale, and transformation, I'll just stop here. This is a quick comment.
Thanks, Dushyant. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe I can add
Yes.
to Mr. Mathur and Dushyant. Thank you, Mr. Mathur, for setting up the foundation on leadership as well as speed, scale. I think two things which stands out for sure is the focus on the digital, the path that we took on enabling digital public infrastructure, which possibly no other country has been able to scale. We possibly leapfrogged many countries, while like many of the countries, even like the most developed ones, were printing paper certificates for vaccines. We were able to maybe reach to the last mile and able to track every vaccination, even at the transaction level. So that's something which is how the power of DPI has enabled. And that started, the journey is not just delivered in maybe in a year or two. It has taken maybe more than a decade. It was set up in foundation around 2010. But then speed has picked up for sure in terms of benefiting to the larger society. And second one, I would say, is the whole momentum around startup ecosystem. We have 100,000 plus startups right now. And like when we were growing up, that was possibly out of question that you possibly will be setting up our own institution or own startup. But then I can see the whole the kind of momentum which is there, and the energy there is also the core of our growth. May not be exactly contributing directly to the GDP right now, but then we can see in every sector, whether even it is the most demanding sectors like agriculture, healthcare, even urban energy, we have seen fintech and some of the other sectors really evolving. So that's another, I would say, pillar for the foundation of the growth that we see around.
Sure, I think that's a good point, and we'll delve deeper into this theme, Puru, as we move forward. Interesting fact is that when we were passing out, or when I was passing out, at least the idea was job first. And today, the idea that you speak to the younger people, the younger kids, and we do that a lot in our interactions. What we hear is job is second, first is the business, the entrepreneurship spirit that typically comes in. So there's a nice step change in terms of what people want to do today, the young people want to do today. So just going on that, say anyone else on this question, or I'll move to the next theme. Okay, so the next theme is more on sectoral advancements that you may have seen, right? And I'll pose this to Puru first to start with. What specific sectors or industries in India have really witnessed exceptional technology advancements, and what really makes them stand out?
Yeah, so I would rather say that more than sector, there are some horizontal development which have happened across. For sure, like fintech is one of the biggest play, but that was sitting on the top of UPI, which was the DPI, the Digital Public Infrastructure, which was set up.
Yeah.
Now, see, while we may be the fifth largest economy right now, and possibly over next decade, we will be third largest by the whole momentum, the way we are growing. The challenge is slightly different, that our GDP per capita is very challenging compared to any developed economies, and even global average. We are almost like one third of the global average right now, even if you bring in PPP as well, price purchase parity as well. Now that's where we need to look at how technologies are helping various sectors, and I would say agriculture is one of the sectors which is may not have resulted in huge dramatic change in the value discovery, but then for sure it is on the ground, the need and the relevance of even if looking perspective ahead is going to play out in a big way. Healthcare for sure, I can see that even like the way the gap of service delivery in terms of doctor gaps in the last mile is now being delivered by some very amazing startups who have been able to deliver technologies to the most like maybe remote districts like Meghalaya, Northeast. So that's something which has really changed, where the technology has really helped. Education was another one which is visible. Edutech is one of the most growing sector. Yes, we have seen some realignment after COVID, but then a sector which holds huge amount of promise as well ahead. And then for sure, like we can see how energy tech and clean tech and energy tech is going to be playing out. So I would say some of these sectors like agriculture, healthcare, education, urban, they are showing a lot of promise in terms of both the existing action but also future ahead.
Sure. A follow-up question, maybe Dushyant, you can start with this, and I'd request the rest of the team to also jump in. Are there any industries you see there is an untapped potential right now? I think Puru pointed out to a lot of industries where we are seeing realization of potential, but do you see significant untapped potential for further innovation from India in any specific industries?
See, I'll probably spend a little bit more around manufacturing, because I believe, one of the biggest challenges had always been, this massive job creation, and also something which sort of became the background for Make in India. So if we really see, till a few years ago, the big question was, can India manufacture? And that's what we started addressing in 2014 as a country. And today the response is very clear that yes, India can. And there are a number of examples of this that you see coming out in select sectors. The very obvious ones, the mobile phone handset story. You talk about pharmaceuticals and some of these areas, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. You can imagine that if we can prove, and we have proven, that we can deliver as a country at cost and with the right requisite quality. And these are just some segments which are starting to happen. So each other subsegment within manufacturing is where there is a lot of play, and especially moving up the tech value chain is where the fun starts happening. And that's what I would say. Again, while there are obviously numerous number of sectors, but every subsector within the manufacturing domain, there are clearly those niches which are there. So if we are today saying that, okay, we have uh, as a country been able to do handsets, and now maybe there are LED fabs which are coming up, and then within electronics there'll probably be at least a good 6 to 7 subsegments which are just waiting to unleash, and which will happen one thing after another. So just a quick some of these points, but manufacturing is something where we can clearly say, and it's all tech enabled. The whole industry 4.0 and tech enabled manufacturing is sort of the way to go forward. I'll just stop here.
Thanks for bringing in this point, Dushyant. And I think the government has also been focused on building competency. It's not that India couldn't manufacture. I think India couldn't manufacture competitively. And I think that's where the focus has been, to make manufacturing competitive. And I think we still need to do a lot more to really get this ball off the court. Mr. Mathur, anything you would like to add on untapped potential in sectors?
Yeah, so just to take off on what Dushyant said about, and Kaushik also mentioned about uh, the manufacturing. See, one thing we got to get clear, that 50% of India's manufacturing is just the automobile and the automotive sector.
Correct.
So I think that kind of skew grossly in favor of the internal combustion engine over the last 3 decades. Definitely because of protectionism to the Indian automobile industry, that the industry continued to thrive, and we are a world leader. But we are a world leader in the internal combustion engine, fossil fuels, along all that. Now, in NITI Aayog, we were looking at this whole transformation away to electric mobility. And so the point I'm coming to is, if you transition very quickly to the electric mobility, and the existing internal combustion engine industry doesn't transform rapidly, we will lose literally 8% of our GDP. 16% of our GDP is manufacturing, but 50% of that manufacturing is just automobile. So this shift to a sustainable alternate to the fossil fuel is one of the opportunity as well as a major threat. So the point I'm making is, we got to start looking at all these threats as major opportunities. Let's say, though it's pretty clear that we are growing and our economy will become a 5 trillion economy, but uh, uh, the income disparities are rising. And if we are not able to address more efficiently the equity with, of course, a democracy, a strong election system, the electoral processes are damn good, the best. I think we sometimes ignore the fantastic spin-off and the tailwind we get because of a very well functioning electoral system. So this is a strength, but then the opportunity is to bring in this democratic traditions into choice of technology, bring into more public debate why SDGs actually impact, wages will go up. Nobody is unemployed in India, let us get it straight. But the wages are very low. So we don't need so many people in agriculture, and we need higher paying jobs. Hence, we need manufacturing. But the service sector. So I think the challenge is we need to export our services. Really 60% of our growth is coming from services. And the use of innovation and technology to deliver services outside India is where there is this huge opportunity, but there is also a threat. You can see what some countries are now doing. They're trying to stifle, and so my sense is we need to be an export-led economy, but not via the traditional manufacturing export-led, because we probably missed that boat. But on services sector, we can be the world beaters, like for ITES. But how about accounting? How about engineering? About R&D? About health tech, fintech? Now, these are all services we can provide global and at scale. I think that's where the next 2 decades for India is. Very strong on the service sector, export of service sector, and this gradual transition to the electric mobility, because we still need to use up our coal. Let's not kid it. We got to use coal for the next 20, 30 years. So I think these are some of the undercurrents which are massive threats, but at the same time, massive opportunities. So I think that's where we need the brightest brains across the world, Indian diaspora, to think through this, and we got to crack this. If we don't crack it, this demographic dividend will become a challenge, a problem.
Thanks, Mr. Mathur. And a couple of points on what you raised. One is on the IT side. We are the leaders globally when it comes to technology services, and I belong from that industry, and we track it in detail. But today, the world, every industry today is an IT industry. I think that's where the change is happening, right? It's not only the vendor providers, the technology vendors who are a unique set. Every company today is beefing up their technology focus, the technology, how does technology make them competitive, make them really a leader in the market. And I think that means that we will not really need to rest our laurels on having the biggest IT industry, but how does India become the biggest IT solutions provider for all industries from India? I think that's the aim that we should have. And the second point you made was on the automotive piece. I think the interesting part is that same in the tech industry, a lot of the electrification and autonomous automotive work that is being done from Indian centers, Indian services for global clients. It's not that India is not doing it. We are probably not just doing it for India, and I think that's where the shift in focus, because that means that we have some people, we have talent, we have thinking, we have the expertise to do this. I think how can we apply that to India? I think that should be a big focus area for us to really ensure that we are future ready for this transformation. So just moving on, I think this third theme is around India's goals and key strategic objectives, and just as you mentioned, Mr. Mathur, that the government has proposed that India would be a developed nation by 2047, and a $5 trillion economy by 2026. How far along are we in our journey towards making this a reality? What must we do this differently as a nation to achieve this successfully? And I'll open this question for all of you, because I'm sure all of you would have views on this piece, on how do we make this $5 trillion and a developed nation dream a reality?
Maybe we can start it, and then possibly we can. I think one of the big gaps that we have is I think one of the question also is come up on tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Like sure, like all the, if you look at mobility numbers or look at maybe even education, school, or looking at health indexes in the number of beds in the hospitals, etc. Tier 1 cities have been the biggest beneficiary, but then the growth has to penetrate into the next level of tier 2, tier 3, what it is called Bharat, right? Now, although like there is a Bharat name which is also being discussed, but then real Bharat sits in the tier 2, tier 3 cities and the villages. So how do we go take the technology impact there is one big priority, and how can we use technologies to deliver benefits there? The second, I would say, pillar is the women inclusion. Now, that's another piece where we have been lacking in terms of inclusion of women in the workforce, and then they're taking their contribution ahead. I would say these two factors are certainly an important one. And the other thing which we possibly need to look at is this whole opportunity that has come in ahead of us is AI. And AI is going to be consuming the biggest fuel which we already have through the data layers getting created under different digital public infrastructure is going to be hugely leveraged. And how can we use AI is going to be another big opportunity for all of us, whether it is through knowledge workers' productivity or strengthening our IT services elements. I would say these three elements are pretty much we can highlight that can play a big role ahead.
I think excellent start, Puru. AI inclusion and balanced regional growth, the way I look at it. We've also done some recent research where we have seen the potential of 26 Indian cities to become as good as the 6 large cities that we have. And I think That's one area that as NASSCOM we commit to working on developing these locations. I'd love to hear more from Dushyant to start with, and then I'll move on to Mr. Mathur. Dushyant, anything you would like to add on to this point?
I'll just like to probably talk more about innovation and R&D, and that is one space I believe there is a lot more to be done. I'm sure we'll be later on talking about startups, and
Yeah.
that's again a component which will come up. But again, when we see the percentage of spend on R&D in India vis-a-vis, other countries, it needs to be really scaled up and increased. There are smaller countries, very small countries at times, which have been able, for example, when we talk about IT, one will relate to the Silicon Valley. But when you talk about, for example, food tech, you'll always relate with a country like Netherlands or, one of those countries. And you'll see the size is so small, but they've been able to do so much. And the heart of this whole thing is innovation. And that's one space in which I would say in this coming next 8 years, because, today we're sitting on this very interesting 2023 with another 7 years to go till 2030. I think for India, leapfrogging and doing a lot more work in innovation is something which they should focus on. And we did talk about cities, but again, probably reflecting onto states. So if we break up our 28 states and the union territory, and you'll see, if there are three of these, you can just bucket them, and you'll see only a couple of these buckets are really firing. Now, if this third one, where the growth is upwards or 7 or 8%, but if these remaining states also start performing phenomenally, then the overall country will tend to really move at a much faster pace.
Thanks. I think Dushyant, you brought out a very important point, R&D. And, if you look at our enterprise spend on R&D in India as compared to any other country, we are probably far lower than most of the global leaders. But I have a feeling that a lot of our R&D spend does not really gets captured in the functional definition of R&D. And I think maybe we need to look at this in a lot more detail. But in the interest of time, Mr. Mathur, any comments on this?
No, so, I agree that, innovation, we have to kind of keep clarifying what do we mean by innovation.
Yes.
Sometimes innovation truly is not happening and we try to, proxy that as if it's innovation. So there has to be a genuine problem, genuine need, which has to be satisfied, not create new needs and call them as innovation. There are existing needs, health, insurance, penetration, everybody needs to get covered, and we need to bring in those basic safety nets in our country. I think those are initiatives that have started, but I think the momentum sometimes slips off. So we really need innovation to have behavior change, because people will have to start behaving in a particular way. So we really need to nudge people into desired behaviors. And I think that's where Samir Andira and Satish Kumar and Harshvardhan, the three, they have asked questions about momentum, the sustainability of the momentum, about industry government aligning, and so it's ultimately people, and we need to nudge behavior change. So my sense is innovation is a lot about, are people going to continue to behave the way they were trained to behave? The Swachh Bharat mission took off. We did great work about 7-8 years ago. But now if you see, we don't talk about it. It's as if we have moved on and we have achieved everything. But that's not how it is. There's still a challenge. We are paying for broadband. We're paying for telecom peanuts. We're really getting very cheap data. We're getting real cheap, but will they sustain? Will there be markets? Will our markets continue to be competitive? What if telcos and broadband players, they gang up together? You have monopolies which are not regulated. So I think we need very strong regulatory bodies. Is enough focus? Are we training the next generation of regulators? We have great set of regulators currently, but is the next is that talent pool still available? The new data privacy law is coming up, and we are actually talking of the private closed markets, digital markets opened up to public, this DPI, the whole DPI message. So I think we need to be also aware of something else passing off is innovation? Are we solving problems for the world? We're not talking of the global north, we're talking of the south. So I think this G20 declaration is really the agenda for us. If we can truly drive the SDGs as we are driving it in India for the whole world. So I think that kind of that's where the export effort, the competitiveness, the best partnerships in the world. So we will continue to be a global leader in thought, in bringing in the best teams together. And I think we'll be the great orchestrator. That role we have started playing. The Indian diaspora, I think in your program, there's a large number of people from across the world, participating. This is real power. If we can continue to network, solve for the world, we are solving for India.
Perfect, Mr. Mathur. Thank you for bringing out the point that innovation is nothing without the right culture adjustment or showing enough persistence in driving through with what we have in mind. The next question is on, what were key strategic initiatives that you feel has been instrumental in India's growth to the top? And we can include DPIs, we can talk about the Make in India push, but are there anything specific that you think really stood out in terms of again, this is a question open for all, and any of you can take the lead on this. Anything that stood out from a action-oriented perspective?
Yeah, I come from government. I've now retired, but I've served in the government for fairly long to see that change happen. So there was, earlier too much of a, so that democracy in a meeting culture went. That was kind of we had decisions. So there were meetings not to just push but there were decisive meetings and there was decision making. So I could see very clear decision making. And
Sure.
Second was a strong commitment to the decision then once taken. So there was nothing like a flippy floppy, iffy. So it all got together. The game got together. Earlier, the states, let's say GST, one thing, it was difficult, but we got it done. It was being talked about. You see the impact of just GST is amazing. So on the power sector reforms, on the infrastructure drive, I think we've got the game together, and the markets are doing well. The private sector has got massive, great opportunities. Banking sector has been, we thought there was a twin balance sheet problem that was addressed. And as we are used to hearing the animal spirits, why isn't the private sector investing in infrastructure? So some of these areas which are great opportunities to make long-term money, but I think somehow equity and private sector investments are not going in some of these, in let's say health tech, in the whole health ecosystem. So my sense is this is an inflection point. I wish we had a way to get the private sector to be a little more risk taking, not be so risk averse. If you're doing the right thing and there is a commitment to the nation, you can't go wrong. But if you want to manipulate, tweak the rules, I think then the government, the state will come down heavily. But if you're a good player, you're a committed guy, you're very, you have good governance, your boards are well run. I think there is no better time than now for big investments made by Indian corporates globally.
Thanks, Mr. Mathur. Puru, Dushyant, you would like to add something?
Yeah, maybe I think, I would fully agree with Mr. Mathur. The focus and few of the pieces that I can pick up again is, one is the building up infrastructure. And I'm talking beyond DPI or digital focus. The infrastructure has been one of the biggest play around, where you can even nobody had realized that we can deliver so fast and so much, right? Whether it's roads, railways, ports, airports. And that's led to the whole unlocking of hidden economies, even going beyond the bigger cities. I would say second one big pillar is that the renewable energy focus. And we all know the dependency on oil, although continues, and it's still going to play out for a longer run. But then the whole strategy of building up renewable, the solar, or maybe even other sectors like wind and others, is an amazing level of initiative which has gone much deeper. And other thing which I would say is that the focus on skills is another big piece, although it needs to be still kind of deliver its results, because we have such a young workforce. And if we have to prepare for a developed economy, as we said, like 2047, we should be reaching there. Unless we address that part by using technology or by using on ground capacity, that's going to be a big opportunity ahead for us.
Makes sense. I think moving on to the next point, and this is for Dushyant to start with, and all of you can also jump in. You want to talk about India's thriving startup ecosystem. India has the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. We at NASSCOM, we track only the tech startups, and our number is about 27,000, which is slightly different from the overall number that the government provides. But what unique qualities do you think sets it apart, and what challenges do startups still face in India? Dushyant, you'd like to go first?
Yeah, maybe I can come in here. And since you just threw a number, let me also again pick up a couple of numbers here. You said 27,000. When you look at the number of recognized startups,
Yeah.
uh, maybe on 2nd October, maybe just in a few days from now, we should hopefully be seeing that 100,000, recognized
Yeah.
startups happening. I think we are somewhere at 99,003 or 400 or so. So that's one. But, if you just move back into December, 2015, a month before Startup India was launched, there were hardly a few thousand. There were hardly maybe 3 or 4 states which had policies, maybe less than 10 unicorns, and one has maybe around 111 unicorns today. So, but the biggest thing, and that's again something which Puru did talk about, and also did Mr. Mathur, is the fact that it is fine to have a failed startup. It's something which you can proudly put on your resume. That's something which was not possible maybe a decade ago. So that's the biggest cultural shift. Uh, Talking about qualities, very clearly frugal innovation and jugaad, that I would say is sort of always a number one. But a lot of qualities which come out of the Indian culture. So when we look at resilience in the face of adversity, you know, uh, we all believe in hard work and dedication. The concept of family, family support, uh, spirituality, mindfulness. Now, all of these things are what I would say come really out of our the Indian culture. Now, those are again which come in, but also, and again, something which was talked about earlier. It's the large population and the growing middle class. Now, this gives like a test bed for startups to play around with. Now, this opportunity is not available in a lot of other countries, but startups in India are able to do a lot there. Uh, Talking about challenges, just 2 quick points related to that before I talk about that. First would be when we look at the global startup ecosystems. Now, that's a recent report dated June 2023. It starts with the line "Trouble is opportunity" and clearly says that VC funding has been at a crazy downward trend globally. So that was one point. And then things such as the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. So those are global things which have been happening at one time. And again, to talk about challenges in India, let's look at what the 3, 4 phases have been. So there was a phase before maybe 2015, and that was more again, IT, ITES. It was about e-commerce. It was about online travel. That sort of stuff. And then maybe post Startup India, which was the second phase or second cycle. That's where you did have a lot of tech startups. The whole fintech, food delivery, ride sharing. So that's where a lot of substantial funding started coming in. Third cycle was the COVID cycle. And again, the unicorn numbers are phenomenal during the COVID time period. A very interesting story which has been written. Now we are at the end of that cycle and the beginning of the fourth cycle. So that's where we would say this cycle is going to be about innovation. It is about sustainability, profitability, and it is about global ambition. And all of these are stemming from the current challenges which are there. So when you talk about things such as layoffs, and there's a lot of downsizing, which has been majorly been happening from the larger startups. So early stage, startups, they continue hiring, but the large ones, there is an issue there. But then, again, good good sort of practices in place. Large startups need to redefine themselves, and that's something which they're really doing right now. And they're re-looking at their business models. So that's something which will help them take them through this phase which has been going on. We've already talked about innovation. That's something which is now very seriously being focused on, and more attention probably needs to be to be given for them. Funding, again, it's a global phenomena. It's been happening here also. But again, one thing which is important is strong corporate finance principles and practices being in place is something which startups now are taking much more seriously, especially the larger ones. There's always the fund of funds which has been there. There's been a Startup India seed fund. All of these things do help, but again, funding is something which we hope and expect that it should again increase a lot more. Regulatory environment, I remember the definition of Startup India. I was there in that room, was where the Honorable Prime Minister said that we want to just move out of the way and let startup do their thing. And there's been something like close to 60 regulatory changes, but again more and more can continue being done on that space. And clearly new areas are emerging when we look at the fourth cycle or the fourth phase: climate startups, hydrogen startups, deep tech. That's what it is all about. So I'll just stop here, but that was a little lay down onto how the startup ecosystem has been evolving in India.
Thanks,
We
Dushyant.
hope it
Anybody
should.
else would like to chime in?
Yeah, so there's a question I can see. Is there a gap you see in India's startup market specifically? Is there one that NRIs can fill? Keen to hear your thoughts. I think one of the areas where we need a real tech and behavior nudge is going back on land records and land management, asset management. That whole ecosystem. So something drastically needs to happen that we can take away the litigations and precious time and energies go. So land records and how quickly can we digitize and clean up the mess that exists in our land records. We and I sitting in cities, in apartments, we don't really know what morass. I've been from the IAS. I've done more 20 years in the districts and in the state governments. That's one area where I don't see talent or startups coming in. So why can't we have some NRIs around the world coming into into the land record market and bringing in more products that people can use, and we can resolve better measurement of land. We have a whole initiative called the PM Gati Shakti. I'm sure you've heard of it, and this is the entire ecosystem that the government is trying to put in place. So 1,600 digital layers on every lat long pan India, and 26 ministries, departments. So all infra will be now available, state as well as national, on the GP on the GIS platforms. But that is still not accessible to the private guys. So land records are already computerized, but we need some more brains to start working. In NITI Aayog, we were trying, but it's a little contentious. It's a state subject. So I think that's one area where my sense is there is space for NRIs. The other is this whole health data. I know with the data protection law now in place, and with this open banking coming up, you may be reading about the Reserve Bank of India itself issuing digital currency, real-time digital currency. We might be the first in the world. We are in the world to be issuing digital currency. Again, a massive area where we can really be a world leader and completely transform the way credit is delivered. There was talk about startups getting credits. So there will never be another funds type of thing, Mr. Thakor. I know that the government doesn't have money to give out to startups. It has to come from the markets. But what will happen is users will start paying long term for use. So why can't I pay 50 years or 30 years up ahead my tolls? All the tolls that I pay, cannot I create a fund and pay for my tolls upfront? Can I buy bonds? So I think we'll have to really bring the market the individual retail customer to invest directly in infra. I think those innovations are not far away, and we only need. And Reserve Bank, I can say that this is a fantastic time for the regulators, and they've got together. You see TRAI, RBI, whether SEBI. I think the regulatory ecosystem is beautiful in India. Other countries do not have such efficient, with their ears to the ground, regulators like ours. So that is the space of regulatory sandboxes that NRIs can come in, propose a regulatory sandbox, try out some innovations which might require the law to be changed, some practices to be changed. That is where innovations will come in. And I think that's the space for startups to come in. Thank you.
Thanks. Moving on to the next point on the global tech landscape and India's contribution. I think we all know that India is a leader when it comes to technology and innovation, the tech sector at least. And Puru, maybe this question is for you. How do you envision India playing an even more important, more substantial role in the future of the global technology industry? I mean, how do you see India, shaping its current focus into something more expansive?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest leverage India will be having is this whole growth momentum, which possibly other developed economies may not be able to offer in terms of the scale and the capacity, because we are the most populous nation. We will possibly be the most also data-enabled economy. Now that sets us to as a perfect playground for leveraging technologies to shape the future. Now, how we see we can influence or we can possibly drive is one is obviously the technologies need to be governed properly and more responsibly, because that's one thing which, although there is a lot of noise about AI being kind of restricted in terms of usage, and various countries have taken in different approaches. UK takes it more sectoral specific, red flag based approach. And then we have seen Europe or maybe EU regulations are coming in more like binding on LLMs or language models. US is like self-governance. So different countries are taking a different approach, but AI will be more like borderless. It will not like having a more like a kind of a country-based regulation approach will help. Will not really help. So how can we maybe use our powers to the high momentum, the high big market that we have, and then possibly play a role of responsible use of technologies across. And then still we have the big advantage of like, if anything can succeed in India, it can make most of the money all across. So the unitary economics in a developing market, which is possibly India, is going to be one of the biggest on that side, whether it is agriculture, whether it is healthcare, or whether it is going to be any of the other sectors which will come up, like say energy. If it plays out well in terms of unitary economics here in India, we can certainly help scale it all across the world. The only challenge that we have here is that while we may have 100,000 startups, we still are not very IP centric. I mean, like we have not been able to really create technologies, and that's where possibly some of the questions coming in, that how can India diaspora help? How can possibly others people can come in? I think that's where the big focus has to be, that how can we create IP centric innovations where we can retain the value as well within the country. And that's one thing which we had. And the other thing is government is certainly playing a big role, and Mr. Mathur spoke about it when he was there, and still he keeps looking at those aspects. India is, the policymakers are really very big focus on how do we bring innovation to the play of growth. And there are very few very developing, few really states which are very high action oriented. They have been coming out with models like public-private partnerships enablement on the ground to reshape some of the core challenges on some of the most demanding sectors of taking the technologies to the last mile. So I would say they have the priorities right. They have even the intent and action right. It's just the whole way that we play this next 10 years is going to be hugely important.
Sure. And I think the last section before we jump into some of the audience questions, maybe a 2-minute capture from each one of you. I think India has made remarkable progress up till now. But what are the areas of improvements you seek, which you think are essential for India to really sustain and enhance its position as a global leader? And Mr. Mathur, you want to start this first, and then we'll go down the table quickly. 2 minutes each, please.
So I couldn't get the question. You're asking specifically about the sectors?
No, I'm just asking that, what do you think India needs to do to sustain and enhance its position as a global leader in technology, and what we are doing as an economic powerhouse? A couple of steps that you think, two things that comes to your mind.
Yes. So, nothing different than what we are doing already. I think we need to continue to engage with the world leaders. You had Jensen Huang of NVIDIA coming and meeting our Prime Minister. Now, I don't know how many world leaders would really understand what Jensen Huang is. This is the second meeting that our Prime Minister has had with Jensen.
And within 2 days, 2 announcements after that.
Yeah.
In 2 of the biggest companies in India.
Absolutely. So these are the kind of this is the kind of listening. So there are people who are listening to the best in the world. I think that's where we are. I think that at the cutting edge, we need to listen to the best in the world wherever they are, and get the best for our nation, which is not only for our poor people but for the global South. I think that is what we need to continue. It's not about solving only for India. It's about solving for the world. The Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. I think that's.
I completely agree. If we solve for India, we'll solve for the world.
In fact, if you solve for the world, India is getting solved. There's no way. It's just like, so we need to just continue that. It's not a small India. It's not a chota wala India. It's that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We got to solve for the world. In fact, we got to solve for the universe. We're going global. We're going to the space. So why not Indian startups start looking already at the space? We should have 100 Elon Musks in India in the next decade.
Okay, 100 Elon Musk, the target for us. Dushyant, Puru, you want to add something?
Yeah, just one quick point. So I would say picking up, really looking at things at a sub-sector level, and then creating ecosystems which are really competitive and best in the world, be it from the perspective of, let's say, innovation. So we talked about IP, or we talk about ease of doing business, or any of these dimensions. So that would be one thing. Second, we did talk about Indian, companies going global. I did want to quickly mention that, we at the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies are organizing for the first time in India. That's the 27th edition of the World Investment Conference. It's happening in New Delhi, at IICC Dwarka, the venue which was very recently, inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister, and all NRIs, investors from India, they're all welcome to be there. So, we look forward. We'll be probably getting investment teams from more than 100 countries and investors from all over the world there. That's 11th to 14th December, but 13th December would be the key day. So I just thought I'll mention about that.
Thanks. Puru?
Yeah, I think I can just maybe say that as if we look at next decade, I would say the whole focus should come on our GDP per capita, and that's what we call it inclusive India for leveraging technologies. Because that's, even if I see this not just as a challenge, but as a huge opportunity. And I was reading one report that like maybe China and India were almost like at the same at around 1995 in GDP per capita, but then China is where it is right now and where we are. So even if the whole opportunity of we reaching the global average, maybe even next few years, should be an opportunity ahead. And if we reach the global average of GDP per capita, we would have achieved all our goals. So I think that's something which we should be leveraging. And there are enough opportunities and enough green shoots we can see while we have done few things right. The other things like how do we build up skills? How do we set our women inclusion in the workforce? And then how do we really look at maybe more an IP-centric approach in the startup ecosystem? And then we will own a significant value of the world economy. Otherwise, we'll keep happy here within the national boundaries discussions. But then when you go to a global room, we don't really see India as a big play in terms of economic value realization or maybe the portion. So that's something which I would say we need to play our inclusive growth as one of the big focus areas.
Perfect. How can initiatives like Billion Dreams, like we are doing right now, really help? And maybe one thing that each one of you can add to this point.
Maybe I would say,
sorry. I think these events you are holding after longish gaps, you can hold them more. Maybe you can have these events more frequently, and there should be follow-up on the questions, and kind of an engagement which goes on. It's not like a one day. I don't know how you engage, you continue to engage, but yes, we need the diaspora, the NRIs to network. This is the time we need each other. We sitting in India and them there. This is the right time we got to capture value for our nation.
Sure, thanks. Dushyant?
Again, NRI bucket is a very important and a very critical one, and you guys are already focusing on it. But then the next step, and Mr. Mathur did mention about it, maybe things such as investable projects. Now, states are sort of bringing it out, but how do you present it if I'm an NRI sitting and I know I have a little bit of money which I don't mind investing? It's the gap between the cup and the lip which billion dreams can actually really close very quickly. So bringing the opportunities to investors in a very simple manner, so and investable projects could be one such way of doing that. I'll just stop here.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe I'll just take an example. I know it's good that we're talking about the power of billion dreams. I was in touch with one of my friends in Sharad, who runs the iSpirit, is the founder there, and they have some 160 or 170 people who possibly were all part of global diaspora, and they are right now contributing to the most of the initiatives that are happening around on the digital side. If we can have more platforms like iSpirit, I think we will possibly be able to really channelize the whole energy, the resources, the connections that we have all across, and maybe really help build a billion dreams together.
Perfect. I think that's a great summary. And maybe there are a couple of questions that we have not addressed from the audience. I think one is for you, Mr. Mathur. How do Indian policymakers prioritize and balance the diverse needs of a country as vast and populous as India? You have touched upon it earlier, but if you have a couple of comments on this question, maybe you can take that.
Yeah, so Indian policymakers at the central as well as the state level do need to kind of balance the diverse needs, and that's why one size fit all won't work. And then there is need for what we call in NITI Aayog the cooperative competitive federalism. So while we compete, we also cooperate, and competitive spirits have been unleashed. States are competing against the other. There is ranking of states. Inside the states, the districts are being ranked. Districts are competing with other districts. So there are 720 districts. We have an aspirational district program. So I think the policymakers are actually now more closer to the ground, and there is data-based decision making, not anecdotal. So we are moving to far more granular data for policy. So earlier policy would be kind of just hanging in the air, and then it was tested on the ground. But now it is the other way around. A lot of data comes in, and only then policy prescriptions. I think that is happening fairly effectively. And going forward, more technology, access to data is making it, the finesse is there. And we do not have the hegemony of the center in things like education, which is state subject, more freedom, but with a common stream. I think that blend is pretty good.
Sure. Dushyant, can you take this one, which says, what role can the Indian diaspora play in fostering innovation and investment in India?
Sure. So, one of the points which Mr. Mathur had initially talked about as an example, infrastructure. And, he mentioned about asset recycling and, so for example, toll roads and, maybe, for example, tolls getting collected and all of that stuff. Now, obviously, one is talking about big money, but these are very good examples of investable projects. And there have been scenarios where there's been fairly, decent amount of monies which have been already raised. Now, obviously, this needs to be structured very well. But today, India presents, a huge opportunity, for NRIs to invest in. Now, it could be directly if NRI is specifically running a particular company in a given sector, there is a good possibility that that business, maybe some sort of a manufacturing, if it's there, or if it's a service industry, an expansion of that could take place in India if they're not already doing that. So that could be one example. Second way could be direct, funding, which could be into startups, it could be into projects. Now, obviously, the vehicles in which you do it is something which needs to be probably looked into. But that again would be, another area which one could focus on. So
Sure. Sure. I think one more question I saw at the start was whether this growth momentum is sustainable. I think this is very sustainable. There is so much of headroom for growth when it comes to where we are today and where we can be tomorrow. And the India stack going global, a tremendous amount of aspirational customers, a progressive policy regime, very inclusive digital infrastructure, very fast improving physical infrastructure, stable economy and political environment. I think those are all the recipes that you need for sustaining the momentum. There's one question here which is aimed at Puru. Do you feel since India is now a superpower, the reasons many people leave in the first place are now irrelevant? And I think this is coming from the audience that is out there. Any comments on this?
I would agree, and what Dushyant said is this is a perfect opportunity right now, and we have spoken about all the factors. Like we have the largest possibly enabled digital infrastructure, and look at the whole deep penetration of wireless or maybe 5G networks that right now happening, or more, almost like all the villages are having fiber connectivity. Where would you have and then smartphone penetration, right? I don't think really there could be any other place with so much of potential available and so much of headroom available. I would say in terms of the next decade, why we say this is going to be India's decade is that the headroom is so huge that even if we catch up with the global average, we will beat everyone. So that's something which possibly we should look. And the whole reason of like why people leave is like maybe if most of the people are going to be working for multinational companies outside, and then possibly India is one of the best places right now. I don't even see the huge salary differences between what MNCs are paying here in India versus MNCs paying in US or at any of the senior level positions. So why not you kind of look at opportunity here in India, invest, and whether you directly invest or whether you run your own startup or whether you kind of possibly become a venture capitalist, the opportunities are all across, and this is the best time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I
I think
we add one
yes,
line.
Mr.
We didn't talk about the defense industry and national security, and those challenges. I think one huge sector where the NRIs and more startups and more private sector is in the defense architecture itself. We need to be very cognizant of the security threats our nation will face is facing, and going forward, how we can be the beacon to other geographies, other countries in the South, Africa, and other friendly countries. So we need to also bring in that connect with our diaspora, with our NRIs. Somehow, this word of NRIs, it might evaporate. It's only if you don't pay taxes in India that you carry the tag of an NRI. I don't think it's a very it's a distinguishing tag. You're an Indian, but you kind of stay away from India to avoid taxes. So I think somewhere we need to look at this narrative, like a US citizen is taxed globally, but an NRI isn't. So is there is there a sunset clause on this whole business of being an NRI? You hold an Indian passport, you can be anywhere in the world, you get taxed on your global incomes. That's just a thought.
I think
Achyuta,
that's
if I
a
can just add one quick point. One trend which I see happening a lot more is Indian companies going global more and more, including medium-sized companies. While there's been a lot of FDI coming into India, but the investments going abroad, there was a time when India would easily compare with some of those other large countries which invest outside. But now again is a trend which we see happening. Now, when these Indian companies are going outside, many a times it's again a great opportunity for the existing NRIs there to possibly consider partnering with them, because some of the companies do prefer like a joint venture sort of a mode as they go out. So that's another opportunity I did want to mention.
Sure. And I think we can go on and on this topic, but I think we've quite exceeded the time that we were given. It's a very inspirational discussion this discussion that happened today. What's really clear is that India will become the third largest economy in the world this decade. But what is evident from this discussion is how fast India achieves this will depend on technology and talent coming together to create that magic. And I think that's where initiatives such as Billion Dreams can really help. I would like to really thank Avinash and the entire Global Talent Exchange team for arranging this session at such an opportune time. And I would also like to thank all of you, exceptional leaders in this panel, for their time and insights. Great learning experience for me, and I look forward to future engagements with you in the future. Thank you.